Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. The saga of Vijay Mallya goes on. With the loan dues on his wound-up Kingfisher Airlines estimated to be about 9,100 crore rupees, Mallya has taken off to London, though he claims he is on international travel and is not absconding. Meanwhile, a consortium of banks led by State Bank of India is now trying to get him to come back and face law. While the problem of non-performing assets and stressed loans have grown exponentially over the last few years, the question of how to recover them and if not just write them off has become a matter of debate. Corporate loans restructuring, or as some call it evergreening of loans, has been practiced with express permission of even the Reserve Bank of India. Today we will look at how banks end up with such huge unpaid loans, what has been responsible for it, and how and if these loans can be recovered. And also, is there a way the government can keep these kind of problems under check in future, and how? To discuss this, I'll have with me Mr. C.M.Vasudev, former Finance Secretary on the phone line from Shimla, Mohan Guruswamy, Senior Economist, Professor Arun Kumar of Center for Economic Studies and Planning, JNU, B.D. Narang, ex-chairman of the Oriental Bank of Commerce, also will be on the phone line, and Priya Ranjan Dash, a senior journalist. Welcome to all of you. Mohan, is this problem of Vijay Mallya's a specific problem related to his Kingfisher Airlines, or is it an industry problem?
It is an industry problem. It's a problem affecting all areas of Indian sectors of Indian industry.
All sectors, not just aviation.
Not just aviation. It is this business of evergreening of loans, this business of giving loans on spurious collateral is endemic now. Companies, none of the big NPA companies are today, there are 6 out of the top 10 are NPA companies. That means they're not able to service their interest. Actually, this business, you don't really repay the loans. Rolls keep rolled around because the business of the bank is to lend money. You want the debt to be serviced, that is the interest to be paid. That's where the bank makes its money. You want the loan to be secure and the interest to be paid. Now, these companies, the loans are supposed to be secure because of the big business houses, but the interest is not being paid at all. In the case of Mallya, you mentioned that the State Bank wants him to come and face the law. Now, what is the law? You lent him the money. You lent him the money with the brand name as collateral. Kingfisher Airlines, a loss-making airline, you valued his brand at 3,000 crores and gave him money. He's running a sinking airline. He went to the bank and asked for money and they gave it to him. So why is the banker not being held responsible? Why are bankers not being called into this? Because after all, they lent the money. A dying man will go with anything and ask for money. And he went and asked for money and they gave it to him.
So you're saying that the liability of the banks are not really, they don't seem to be liable at all for all these things that happen.
No, they don't seem to be liable at all, and they made the wrong decisions. And, to say that, this man committed a fraud will be very difficult to prove, unless you prove that he siphoned the money out from there.
Right.
But the airline has made a loss of 7,000 crores in that period. During the same period, Air India made a loss of 43,000 crores.
Exactly. So this is also you say it's a sector problem, actually. Mr. Vasudev, who is liable, who should be held liable? Mohan Guruswamy thinks that the banks which have been giving loans, without doing the a proper assessment of whom they are giving loans to and whether they can be repaid. You think that the liability on the lenders also is an important aspect to this? And second question is, are these problems specific problems related to Mr. Vijay Mallya, or you think this is a completely an industry problem?
No, I think it is certainly a problem of the bank. They are primarily liable for whatever is happening, and more so, I would say, the public sector nature of the banks. And you would see that whatever exposure is there, whatever the non-performing loans of Mr. Mallya and his company are, they all relate to public sector banks. And there is this issue of government as the owner of the public sector banks also trying to influence the commercial decision of the banks, not very directly, but indirectly it happens very often. I have also seen it in my own days. And therefore, it is the problem of the public sector banks. They have taken this exposure with Mallya and his company, and they did not do sufficient due diligence before they gave the loans. They did not take sufficient collaterals for that. An airline industry doesn't need that much of an exposure, especially when it has no assets. Most of the aircrafts are on lease. The company doesn't own any of these. So what was the securities that the bank had before they lent so much of money? And that also a personal guarantee. And personal guarantee, he has obviously stripped all his assets which were in his name. There's nothing in his name, so it's very difficult also to invoke his personal guarantee.
Right.
So I don't know what is it. Certainly there's no criminal liability as far as the lending is concerned, but criminal liability of Mr. Mallya will arise if the enforcement directorate issue is correct, that he has siphoned off money from India to foreign locations without following the law. And that would be the criminal liability. But as far as the lending by the banks is concerned, it is primarily the concern of the banks. And it needs to be found out when the banks, the IDBI and the SBI took their exposure, at what level that decision was taken, what type of due diligence was done, and what was the role of the government also at that time.
No, that's exactly the point, Mr. Vasudev. You, in fact, earlier you hinted at how these loans are sanctioned to such industrialists, and you said that you have been in that position as a finance secretary. You think that it is the governments, whichever governments are in power, are responsible, or they push these banks to lend, because this whole corporate debt restructuring takes place at the highest level.
Correct.
The decisions are taken at the highest level.
I think the basic problem is arising out of the public sector ownership of these banks. And our system is not that mature, and government has so much power over these banks, and it appoints all the chairmen and the directors and the chief executives and everything. These people are only too willing to do the bidding of the government, even in slight hint, and they will go overboard to do whatever the government wants. So I think the basic problem is that one, and the government has to get out of running of these banks and reduce its ownership and make it creatures of the company law and accountable to the company law. This Nationalization Act under which these banks have been created, I think that is, if you really want to find out the crux of the problem, the basic problem. But that is a much difficult one politically and a long way one. But there will be many cases of this type, I'm pretty sure, where banks have taken commercial decisions on the suasion of the government.
Okay.
So it's, yeah.
Okay. Professor Arun Kumar, this restructuring of Kingfisher debt was apparently done in 2010.
Right.
And it was the RBI which asked the banks to. So now can you blame the banks for, RBI has told them, please do this restructuring. And on the basis of that, the banks came in and became a consortium of banks got together and restructured the debt. And then the sector had a problem. All said and done, the aviation sector had a problem.
Yeah. I think we have to step back a little bit and see that the entire political class is involved in it. The entire financial sector is involved. When you say RBI and banks and the political decision making, it means the entire financial sector. And as has been already said by the previous speakers, it's the decision making that's been a problem. So you see, when a downturn comes, as happened after 2007-8, and the airlines industry went into a problem, then this problem of bad debt increases. So bad debt is a problem all along, because when the loans are given, due diligence is not followed, political decisions are there, crony capitalism is there, which forces banks to lend out to certain companies, etc., because of the political connections. So in a sense, what we are seeing is a combination of the political mistakes that are made, the downturn that takes place, and the industry-specific thing. Now, in this particular case, what has happened is that Mr. Mallya is a very high-profile person. Unlike others who are very low profile, like names were mentioned by Mohan about other businessmen, but they are very low profile. They don't go around doing these flashy parties and, the airline's calendar and various other things, showing that they have a lot of money to waste and they have a lot of money to spend. So the public perception is that here's a man who's taking the public money and wasting the money. So it's become a political hot potato precisely for the reason that Vijay Mallya is a particular kind of person, whereas other businessmen are not doing those kind of things. Otherwise, as Mohan has said, a large number of businessmen are in a similar category,
Right.
or even worse than what this particular case is. So in that sense, Mr. Mallya has created his own problem. If he had not done the kind of things that he has been doing, then perhaps this would have been under wraps, as has been the case with many other companies. But otherwise, the banking sector faces a huge problem. And as you know, that the report came last time when we were here a month back about that 1,14,000 debt write-off. Since then, now the reports are coming that the weak debts have risen from 4 lakh crores and they're rising to 7 lakh crores. And some people even claim 11 lakh crores. So the bulk of the public sector shareholding will actually just disappear, in which case the capacity of banks to lend will actually decline. And if that happens, then the entire industry will be in problem. Government will be in problem because government will have to provide the money for recapitalizing all these banks which have very weak equity base now that it's substantially eroded. So in other words, it's a problem of the entire financial sector that we are facing.
It's quite an alarming situation if from what you are saying. Priya, how far is mismanagement responsible? Because, Mallya has been saying that right from the last 10 years that we have been reading and interacting. He says that the regulations which were there as far as the aviation sector is concerned, the high, fuel prices which used to be there, now it's come low, but it happened only after his airlines closed down. So all these factors have also been there. But how far is the mismanagement at his level responsible for this situation?
You see, the business cycle is one set of issues where companies can fail. But here, basically, 3 set of other issues are involved. And Mr. Vasudev and Mohan and Professor Arun Kumar have already highlighted one set of issues that relates to the lending, the way
Right.
banks, particularly the nationalized government-owned banks, behave in lending. Now, banks have to lend because lending is the primary
The
business.
primary business.
Yes. So the banks will lend, but the norms that they follow in lending and whether those lending is because of any particular motive or there is direct collusion or it's got to do anything with the ownership of the bank being, the government owning them. So that is one set of issue. The second set of issues, purely corporate governance issues.
Right.
And the third set of issues are issues that relate to the regulatory framework that you have. Now, in the last 45 years since nationalization of banks, if you look at it, you've had, people doing, Mr. Mallya's case is not the first one. It's not going to be the last one. So this has been practiced on a very wide, large scale, yet nobody has got punished for it.
Yes.
No improvement or in the regulatory system has been done to prevent recurrence of such things. So these are the basic issues. Now, if you look at the corporate governance issues, here what is happening is one thing is the business failing. The other thing is whether money was siphoned out.
It is said that the business, especially this aviation business, when the global financial meltdown happened, there was a problem across the industry,
Absolutely.
across the world, actually.
There is no denying that. And as Mohan mentioned, you've had Air India, Indian Airlines combined making 30,000 crore loss during
43,000 crores.
43,000 crore, yes, during the same period. So, yes, the aviation sector was so, but these kind of business failures do happen. But here we are talking about a much broader kind of issues, set of issues. And here, to my mind, corporate governance, regulatory failure, the fact that nobody has ever been punished for this kind of thing. If you look at it today, you are trying to see the enforceability of if somebody runs away with 9,000 crore of bank money, public money, whether he faces the law or not. It has not happened so far. Nothing has happened. The biggest corporate fraud in the corporate history of India, you know what has happened in that particular case so far. Now, if that is for somebody admitting himself that he's done an accounting hera-feri of 7,000 crore rupees. Now, that's just could be just the tip of the iceberg.
And he was the
Now,
only
we do
one
not-
because he volunteered to disclose the information. We didn't know
what
about
I'm
it.
saying is,
We wouldn't have known.
He wouldn't have known.
The chartered
the
accountant didn't discover
downside
that.
risk,
Discover it.
the downside risk of defrauding is very minimal in this
Okay,
country.
that's an
so
important-
you would expect the system is riddled with loopholes.
Okay.
You would expect businessmen, unscrupulous fellows taking advantage
Okay.
of it. And
No,
Mr.
but-
Mallya is not the only one.
Correct.
Mohan, Raghuram Rajan has been talking in the last couple of days. He has been talking. He has been warning governments because you put CBI behind all these people, then the risk of people will not take risks. One second, banks will become averse to risk and lending. There is it's a double-edged sword.
No, it's not a double-edged sword. It's a fine line you got to walk. What Raghuram Rajan is saying is our system is so rotten, don't rock it anymore. Okay? And let it continue. And he's also suggesting that, CBI shouldn't inquire,
Yes.
but a committee of bankers
Should inquire.
should inquire. So the culpable are going to investigate themselves and pass judgment on this. It's kind of...
Before he says that, an internal inquiry before you take any serious action.
There's enough internal inquiries. The RBI knows which are the accounts which are stressed, and they've got lists being published that these companies are stressed. Now, when you have those lists published, when you know that the fellow is not able to service his interest, not service his debt and pay interest, then he's in difficulty. So you go and restructure the company. You make him sell some divisions, you make him shut down some businesses, and you set his finances.
Wasn't this
the
tried?
banks?
Wasn't this tried in the case of Vijay Mallya's?
No, it was not tried. It was not tried for anybody. So today, Mallya is only a small fish. What did he owe? He must have borrowed about 4,000 crores, and there's interest on interest and interest on it piled up to 8,000 crores. But there are people who borrowed 10 times more, who are not able to service their debt. So you got to go to them now, before it becomes even worse. Basically, restructure in our banking system means give more money. And give more money means...
To repay the old
no,
debts.
Give more money
First you
means...
write off and then give
Right,
more.
first write off and then-
You don't write off. It just keeps getting extended.
No, here in this case, 1,600 crores were written off, and then 1,600 crores more was given, and now it's piled up further.
No, I don't think it happened in his case.
Yeah,
In his case, there was no write-off.
I've got the...
No, there's no write-off.
No, it was. There was a write-off.
No,
I
but
think there was a write-off.
what happens is what Mr. Vasudev alluded to. The signal goes out from the political powers that be, the people who hold high offices and positions.
Apparently, it
this
was
all has to be cleared.
1,355 crores of debt was converted into equity
Right.
sometime in
But
2010.
that is not a write-off. That is the bank possessing his equity.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Vasudev. Mr. Vasudev, what Mohan says, what Raghuram Rajan is saying, in fact, he's warning the government, he's warning people, how do you react to that? Because he says that if there is such harsh actions without proper investigation at the beginning, then there can be, the entire industry can suffer, the entire banking system can suffer.
Yeah, I want to make 2 points. One is that the banks are quite adept at doing what is called evergreening of assets, which means that if you got a default, he's not able to repay, then you give him fresh exposure in some other form so that the old loan is refinanced and it is evergreened all the time. So that has been a common problem with many banks, including the public sector banks, and RBI has in the past been looking the other way. So it has tightened the norms a little bit in the recent past. But the point which Mr. Raghuram Rajan has now made, I think is quite a valid one, because, this very large NPAs that people are talking about, they do fall into 2 categories. One, of course, is the willful defaulter category, to which Mr. Mallya's loans now fall in. And the other are loans which have the problems of the real sector, sectoral problems, and whether it is steel sector or the power sector or the highway sector, banks have taken exposure on certain assumptions of land acquisition, environment clearances, things of that type have not happened. So government is trying to fix those problems in the sector, and therefore it is not very fair to blame the promoters of the companies who have taken loans. But in the case of willful defaulters, the very definition says that the borrower has the capacity to pay and yet he is not paying. And that is what the situation is. Mr. Mallya has given personal guarantees, and he has a lot of assets which he owns directly or indirectly, which if he were willing to pay, he would be able to pay. So Mr. Raghuram Rajan is really saying that don't treat all NPAs as willful defaulters. And the ones which are not willful defaulters, which are arising out of problems of the performance of the real sector,
No,
in
Mr.
those cases try to fix those problems.
Mr. Vasudev, aren't there rules? Aren't there enough rules now to not to do that? Why is it that the RBI governor has to say this now? Not to treat,
Because,
not to,
yeah,
no, because
yeah, you know,
isn't there
because-
clear rules who is a willful defaulter, who is not?
No, that is true. It's not. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's in his case also. Exposure to Mr. Mallya has been declared as a willful default only very recently. Earlier, it was not a willful default. So the way you could go after a willful defaulter, you were not able to go after him at that time.
Okay.
So it doesn't happen right from day one. That just emerges over a period of time when the company is not doing well and the bank's loans are not being serviced.
Okay.
So what Mr. Raghuram Rajan is saying that they don't make the banks overly risk averse because the very high profile nature of this media, that every banker for taking fresh exposure will be that much more
cautious.
So they will become more and more risk averse.
Right.
That's all he's trying to say.
Okay.
And the other point I just want to make is that
Yes.
there is this talk about 1,20,000 crores, NPAs, this, that, which have been written off by the banks. These are all technical write-offs. They have not been written off in a real sense. The banks will continue to go after them, but just to be able to take some tax relief for the non-performing loans, it is a technical sort of write-off that they have taken.
Okay.
So one should not really
But
overblow.
yeah, that's right. But there is very serious doubt that if any money out of that 1,14,000 crores is going to be recovered at all. Anyway, Professor.
I think as we discussed earlier also, there's a policy issue also. And the RBI would have to address it, especially for infrastructure sector. The government is allowed very large leveraging.
Sir, one more thing. Sorry to intervene. Raghuram Rajan says by 2017 we need to clean up all the account books, and that is the process which is happening now.
That's the trigger for why the banks are
1,14,000 crores is part of that.
That's right, and more will be there as people are now saying that because you're trying to clean up the balance sheets of the banks, so more and more of such loans will be brought on the NPA list or the weak loan list. And therefore, you'll have begin to have difficulty because now that the bankers are more cautious, they'll not lend. As they don't lend, the things will pile up further, and therefore there'll be a problem. So in other words, there's a structural problem, but also there's a policy problem. The government has declared certain infrastructure industries, etc., essential, and therefore the banks have been lending more without doing due diligence. Due diligence is very important for any structured loan, which has to.
Sir, but in this case itself, if there was real proper due diligence done, he wouldn't have got anyway.
He wouldn't have got anything.
And he wouldn't have got anything.
Yeah, absolutely
that's
right.
The problem.
But IDBI lent 900 crores, and that's why the ED is now investigating the IDBI bank. And it's started investigating other banks also, because after IDBI it realizes that money actually went out. So he's declared a willful defaulter because he's taken money out, through various devices. But this is a standard practice of all companies. For instance, when the Satyam company failed, it was discovered there were 700 subsidiary companies through which money was being siphoned out. Other large companies have thousands of companies. For instance, Reliance is supposed to have a very large number of companies, but they're only declaring the accounts of 115 subsidiaries in their accounts now. So in other words, this kind of corporate restructuring also, where money can be siphoned out through various companies into other companies which are weak companies, and that's part of what Satyam happened, because they were taking money out into Maitas and various other things, and only the shareholder revolt is what then brought it out in the public.
Even shareholder revolt didn't bring it out. The promoter himself brought it out.
Because he could not bring money back to actually do it. Shareholders is the one who raised the revolt.
I think there's a private party who had lent him money.
Anyway, we are not discussing.
Figure.
Yes,
he's dead and gone now.
Let's not beat around the bush.
Yeah.
Here we are not talking about genuine business failure. Here
this is not a genuine business failure.
We are not talking about genuine.
No. Vijay Mallya still claims that it's a genuine business failure.
No, but he's saying it's not.
I'm saying that
it is not.
In cases such as this, where we are not talking about business failure, in case of business failure, which has been happening for years, and there are the ways of living with business failure, whether be they the banks or the economy as a whole, that I think there are well-established process for that, and we've gone through that process. Here we are talking about outright fraud. Now, how do you handle fraud is
Exactly.
the question.
That is the question. That is the ultimate question.
Insofar as these kind of restructuring of loans are concerned, the evergreening of loans are concerned, see, normally what we see happening is the focus is not on saving the company. Now, the focus is invariably on saving the management. So, see,
That's right. I think Mr. Vasudev wants to intervene. Let me get, Mr. I'll come back to you.
You do not have a bankruptcy law. That is another reason.
That's another reason.
So there are a lot of
structural problems.
Mr. Vasudev?
Yes, I want to say, it's a very difficult thing to say, but I've seen somebody do a study, and he has come out with this thing that NPA problem generally arises 2 years after any general election. Because a lot of this political funding of parties, Mr. Mallya became a member of Rajya Sabha.
Right.
He would have certainly given a lot of political
Funds.
donation and all that. So where does he get the money from? Where the other corporates get their money from for funding the political parties? They take loans from banks, they overvalue their assets. For 1,000 crore project, they will borrow 2,000 crores. Public sector banks are willing to do that. And then they become NPAs. So he has done a study that over the last 4-5 general elections, the NPA problem generally surfaces 2 years after the elections.
Okay, sir, that's
So a lot of it goes towards funding.
That's a very interesting.
Electoral funding.
That's a very interesting point you have made, sir. That's a very interesting point.
Yes.
This is something which needs to be followed up. I'm sure, hopefully, somebody will follow it up very quickly, sir.
But in this case, what has been found is that Kingfisher or Mr. Mallya has not only defrauded the government, but Diageo also. The properties are being sold at a dirt cheap price, and then Diageo has now this thing. Secondly, he's purchased large amount of property in London and various other places. So he has a lot of money. So it's not that he doesn't
how they are going to recover? Very quickly, last words, Mohan. What is the lesson for promoters as well as bankers from this? And is there a lesson for the government which will take?
There should be a lesson for the bankers first, that don't lend money like this against spurious assets, against spurious parties. This is Mallya's case, at least there was something there. He's got some other companies.
Yes.
There are a dozen companies which don't exist on paper also, who just took away the money and disappeared.
Yes.
And the banks lent. To today's paper saying Punjab National Bank gave 900 crores to 9 companies which don't exist. So, these people have to be punished.
Okay. I think on that note, we need to end. This is a very serious problem. What Mr. C.M.Vasudev said, at the end is something which needs further discussion and hopefully some more study about this. That's a very interesting point made. And as Mohan says and everybody else says, this is a time when the bankers also will need to relook at the way in which they lend, and also the RBI. Anyway, we'll wait and see what happens. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture same time.